Alright, so I just saw It Ends With Us. Let's talk about it. So this is based on the novel by Colleen Hoover, directed by Justin Baldoni, stars Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Jenny Slate, Brandon Sklenar. Now, I bought the book with the intention of reading it before I saw the movie, but that never happened. I got about halfway through. No rhyme or reason, there's nothing wrong. I actually enjoyed what I had read so far. I just didn't budget my book time wisely. So if you are wondering where this ranks as far as adaptations go, I can't really speak to that. I can only speak to the half that I read and then saw on screen. Also, that one dude from Grey's Anatomy, whatever his name is, the one with the red hair, he's in this movie as well. And you can tell which of the girlies in the theater watch Grey's Anatomy because when he turned around, the gasp was audible. So Miss Blake Lively plays Lily Bloom. Lily Bloom is about to fulfill her dream of opening her own flower shop in the city of Boston. She meets this dude named Ryle Kincaid, who is a neurosurgeon, and they, have a romance, and it's beautiful and whatnot, aside from the fact that he is very violent. I'm trying to figure out where to begin. There's a lot to talk about here. I enjoyed that for the most part. That was really good. I mean, it's not earth-shattering by any means. There are definitely some issues. I would say here's the problem with adaptations. And even though I have not read the book in its entirety, this is just a common problem with adaptations, especially in this more modern age. Once upon a time, you could adapt a book and you wouldn't have to adapt it line for line, scene for scene. You could really almost take a nugget of that book and turn it into a brand new story on film. But nowadays, because people are just so freaking stubborn and they hate change and everything has to be exact, you have directors and writers who will concentrate on making sure that key moments within the book are featured in the movie, even if cinematically it doesn't work or it doesn't make sense. I don't think this movie does that from what I've seen. I can definitely remember some scenes that I read that were translated on film where they simplified it and they cut it down and they made it cinematically friendly. Here's the thing about books and film. The difference here is that books have all the time in the world and all the space in the world. Films don't. And when you're going from one medium to another, things have to change. Things have to make sense. What makes sense in a book is not necessarily going to make sense in the film. There are certain things that happen in the book that if you were to do it on screen, it just looks ridiculous. But in a book, it's cute. There's only so much you can do in 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is about how long this movie is. And I didn't feel that 2 hours and 10 minutes. Honestly, this was my biggest problem with the movie, is that I feel like it's not so much that it's missing the plot, but the plot is a little flat for the intensity of the story. I felt like it could have been fuller, if that makes sense. But I also felt like the story, it just starts and then it just stops. I felt like there was a piece of that middle that we were kind of missing. I wouldn't say, oh, they should have added this in the book, or no, not that at all. Just speaking cinematically, I felt like there was just a chunk of the middle, that rising climax that just needed to be there and just wasn't. The dialogue at times is adorably cringy. I love Blake Lively in this. I think this is the first time I've seen her on screen where we knew it was her on screen or she wasn't doing some sort of voiceover. I think this is the first time I've seen her on screen in many a moon. Very long time. And she doesn't get enough credit. She's incredible in this. She's wonderful. She plays trauma very well. It's evident in the way her character speaks and how fast she speaks and how quick she is to want to resolve situations that to her seem intense. And then when we get towards the end and she starts to heal, she kind of slows down a bit. It's a beautiful little transition. There's also some transition with whoever did her wardrobe. I need that person in my life. The chaotic chicness of her wardrobe and how that changes as the film progresses and as she gets towards healing a little bit. I thought that was very well done. I love the color palette of this movie in general. It was just very, very chaotic, and then things just kind of whoosad. I don't know. I liked that. A little bit of foreshadowing in the very beginning when they're sitting on the rooftop. If you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. When they're sitting on the rooftop talking and she calls herself an unreliable narrator. That was so telling. Especially when we get into talking about domestic violence. it was just an interesting moment of irony for her to call herself an unreliable narrator, because she is an unreliable narrator. Because as events happen, we kind of start to question the severity of them, because this is being told from her perspective, and she has skewed the events in order to avoid the reality of them, if that makes sense. And it's not until she comes to her senses that we revisit these events and we see them for what they really are. And we realize that, oh, these weren't just accidents, they were deliberate. But she kept telling herself they were accidents. She doesn't say that visually. I mean, when she's talking to people, oh, it was just an accident, it was an accident. But you can tell, based on the way they chose to frame that in the film, that this was something she was telling herself in her head over and over and over again. It was just an accident. He didn't mean it. It was just a mistake. I just tripped. That was very clever of them. I liked how that was done. Now, there is a little bit of controversy surrounding this novel, and I say it like that because this controversy only exists on TikTok. No one else is having these conversations. But what is this movie about, and how does it handle this main subject? Now, I think if you ask somebody what it's about, oh, they say domestic violence. I wouldn't necessarily agree or say it that way. Yes, this movie definitely features domestic violence. We have Lily Bloom, who is dealing with not just an abusive husband, but also, we start this movie where she is at her father's funeral, and her father was an abuser as well. So I wouldn't say necessarily that this movie is about domestic violence. What this movie is about is just the cyclical nature of trauma and what it is to be trapped in that cycle and the strength it takes to get out. Domestic violence is merely a means, a vehicle in which to tell that cyclical story. But that's the nature of this genre. Now, I don't know if this is still a term that's used, but back in my day when I was working at a bookstore, this would have been in the new adult section. New adult fiction is somewhere between young adult fiction and like erotica. Basically, not just like regular romance, but erotica, because it definitely features a lot of those elements. But there's such a heavy emphasis in the new adult genre on trauma, whether that's medical trauma or the loss of a loved one, neglect, abuse, anything like that. It's all about people who are dealing with these very traumatic things and how they come out of it, how they get past it, how they find love and hope in spite of it. But yeah, I would say that's what this movie is about. It's about generational trauma. It's about cyclical trauma. And just the almost, I don't want to say disappointment, I can't think of the word, but she's very much aware of what her mother went through, and she holds a little bit of resentment, towards her mother for not leaving, and then finds herself in the same situation. And it's interesting how the events unfold, because we are given the opportunity as the audience to see the red flags, to see the warning signs play out, and to kind of watch her navigate those warning signs, or completely ignore them altogether, or just miss them. I mean, the title pretty much says it all. It ends with us. This is about the ending of that cyclical trauma, the cyclical violence that exists in her family tree. The casting of Isabella Ferrer deserves an award all by itself. She plays a young Lily Bloom, so a 15-year-old Lily Bloom. Perfect casting. Perfect casting. I imagine this movie is going to do pretty nice numbers this weekend. I mean, it was a Thursday night, 8 p.m. showing, and my theater was about, I'd say, halfway full. So yeah, the only negative thing that I could think to say about this movie is the pacing. But there's a lot that could be said there, but honestly, totally worth a ticket. I really enjoyed that. Definitely, if you're going to see it, I recommend seeing it in a theater this weekend when theaters are a little more full, because my theater was mostly women, and it felt like I was watching a movie with my girlfriends. The girly commentary. You gotta love it.